Good morning, boys and girls. Happy April Fool's Day. I'd like to hear if you've done any tricks at home today with your family for April Fool's Day. It is the 1st of April and we've got a lovely day with beautiful weather today in Narrabri, so that's really nice. If we're home, we may as well have good weather. I've chosen a book today to read to you called Are We There Yet? By Alison Lester. It's one of our favourites in our family. The Premier's Reading Challenge ID is 15132. So you can log that in your Premier's Reading Challenge log and write it down on your Star Reader booklet as well, so you can keep track of what you're reading. And I thought we could read this today because normally we might be getting excited for our trip that we might have coming up for our Easter holidays or the Easter break, and we're not really supposed to be going anywhere these holidays. So we can imagine that we're on a big road trip around Australia through our books, and this one is a beauty. Are we there yet? And the first page has a big picture of Australia on it, showing where they went on their trip, and a lovely drawing over here as well. Are we there yet? And I'm sure we've all been in the situation when we're in the back seat of the car and we've driven 600 kilometres or more, and every town we go, are we there yet? Are we there yet? And we drive mums and dads crazy. Okay. Starting out. The year I turned 8, Mum and Dad took us on a trip around Australia. Luke, Billy and I missed school for the whole winter term. Sounds a bit like us. Nan and Popper stayed behind to look after Buffy and Tigger and Bess. We towed Popper's old camper trailer and it was our home for 3 months. It folded out to make a little house with a table, a fridge, 2 double beds, a stove and a sink. It had everything we needed. And here's Mum, Dad, Luke, me, which is Grace, and Billy, and a map of their caravan, and there's their caravan there. So they practiced in the backyard before they left, and that's what it looks like in their caravan. That's so much fun. Luke slept in his swag under the stars except when it rained, and then he bunked in with us. We were squashed, but it was cozy. And they live near a tiny place called Binham, and that's where our journey, or their journey, started and finished. That's right down the bottom of Victoria. The day we left, I helped Nan pin up a big map of Australia so she and Popper could follow our journey. I wish I was coming, Grace, Nan said as she hugged me tight. I'm going to miss our cuddles. On the road at last. I waved to Nan and Popper until Dad turned onto the road leading out to the highway. I felt sad and excited at the same time. Nobody said anything for ages, not until we reached the coast. We saw the last autumn leaves fluttering like flags on the grapevines of the Barossa Valley. Then, at the Coorong, Luke made us laugh. Look, he said, a pelican. Its beak can hold more than its belly can. On our first night, we camped on the edge of the Flinders Ranges. It felt like we were the only people in the world. At Streaky Bay, we stuck our heads in the mouth of a great white shark. We made letters with our shadows at Murphy's haystacks. The giant boulders glowed in the afternoon sun. That evening at the camping ground, Mum said Billy had to use the women's bathroom because he was still little. He was embarrassed. Okay, he said, but if anyone comes in, call me Kylie. We drove past wheat silos and windmills, and Billy said, are we there yet? It took us 2 days to cross the Nullarbor plain. I waved to the people in passing cars and trucks, and they always waved back. We all had our favourite positions in the car. So it says here, Dad loved driving, Luke rode shotgun, Billy and I shared the middle, and they've called this Graceland, that's the border, and Billyville. Mum liked the back where she could lie down and read. Oh dear, that sounds too good to be true. The Great Australian Bite looked like a giant had bitten a huge chunk out of Australia. Dad and Luke stood right on the edge of the cliff, but Mum stayed back. She held on to Billy and me so tight that my hand went numb. Oh, she said, I can't look. And that's what it is called, boys and girls. Oh, well, I'll show you just up here. The bottom of Australia is called the Great Australian Bite because it does look like a giant has taken a big bite out of the bottom of our continent. At head of Bite, we saw 10 whales in the sea below us. A mother and her calf were rolling and wallowing together. Their mournful music sounded like an underwater orchestra. It's making me sleepy, I said to Mum. They must be singing a whale lullaby. That might be a nice idea if you can look up YouTube perhaps and look and listen to whales singing. It's pretty spectacular. Over the desert and into the west. At Eucla we had sandy sandwiches near the ruins of the old telegraph station. Next day we travelled for nearly 150 kilometres on a dead straight road. Wow, that's all the way from Narrabri to Moree and then halfway back, all straight, no corners. That's a long way. Dad pretended to drive with his eyes closed, but I could tell he was peeping. Thank goodness. Luke surfed on stone at Wave Rock, but Dad waited for the real waves at Rottnest Island. The quokkas came so close to me, I could see their tiny whiskers. After Perth, we went to see the pinnacles. They poked up through the sand like giant limestone fingers. So this is what we can see. This is what is hidden underground. And this is what they think the pinnacles really are. It was so windy at Geraldton that the trees grew sideways. We drove past a pink tapestry of wildflowers and Billy said, "Are we there yet?" Those wildflowers are beautiful. The further north we travelled, the hotter it became. We stood in the shallows at Monkey Mire to see the dolphins. Too crowded, said Dad. I liked it better when it was just us and the whales. Mum made me wear my hat all the time. Hats and sunscreen, she'd say every time we stopped. That sounds a bit like me. This sun will burn you to a crisp. That afternoon, Mum and Billy and I had a picnic in the dunes and then fell asleep like a pride of lions. Later, when we went for a dip, a dolphin came up close and swam right between us. How amazing would that be? We went snorkeling at Turquoise Bay. A gentle current carried us over the coral reef as though the ocean was giving us a tour. There were so many fish like sparkling jewels. My favourites were the tiny blue angels. How spectacular. At Broome, we ate crunchy fish and chips and watched the moon reflected in the mud flaps of Rosebuck Bay. It's called the Staircase to the Moon. The next day, we camped at Winjana Gorge. Mum loved the boab trees. They look like opera singers, she said. Dad and Luke called them upside-down trees. We flew over the Bungle Bungles in a helicopter without any doors, and my stomach turned inside out. I can't look, said Mum again. At Tunnel Creek, we waded through an underground river. The dark water came right up to my armpits. When something slimy slithered past my leg, I screamed. Luke said, "Don't be such a sook." Heading south on the Tanami track, the sand was so deep our car got bogged. Everyone felt hot and grouchy, and Mum was worried we'd be stranded in the desert. Luke found a tiny, thorny devil standing fierce as a dragon, and that cheered us up. A football team helped push us out, and Billy said, "Are we there yet?" At Alice Springs, we stayed with Mum's friend Ruth. The days were hot, but the nights were freezing. Luke and Billy played footy with some local boys. That afternoon we drove out to see Uluru. Dad spotted it first when we were still 35 kilometres away. "Wow," he said, "that's a big rock." At sunset we watched its colour fade to purple. Ruth took us to her school and a teacher showed Mum and me how to dig for witchetty grubs. They tasted like egg yolk, runny and delicious, with a crunchy head and wriggly legs. Ugh, gross. Mum wouldn't try one. "No, thank you," she said. "I'm still full from breakfast." That's what I'd say too. We hiked between the round red domes of Carter Juta. The trees whispered to us as we walked through the Valley of the Winds. Doesn't that look amazing? Uluru is the heart of Australia. A huge red heart right in the middle of the country. One day we got up early in the cool of the morning and walked around the rock. I felt as tiny as an ant. And you can see in this map here, Uluru is right in the middle of Australia. In the top end. We floated down Catherine Gorge below towering ochre cliffs. "This is the life," said Dad. "Just wake me up if we come to a waterfall." We drifted so slowly that even a tortoise swam past us. We stayed with our cousins in Darwin and played in their shady pool until we were as wrinkled as prunes. At night, the ceiling fans whirred constantly overhead. Even a sheet felt hot. Tiny grey geckos hunted insects on the walls. Mum and I loved the market at Mindle Beach. There was so much yummy food, it was hard to choose. We ate satay prawns and drank mango smoothies as we watched the sunset. We drove across the floodplains past egrets and Jabiru, and Billy said, "Are we there yet?" At Kakadu, we went on a billabong cruise. The boat drew so close to one enormous crocodile that I could count its teeth. We swam at Gunlom, where there were no saltwater crocodiles. The water was cool and silky. Dad kept diving under and grabbing my feet, and even though I knew it was him, I screamed every time. Luke caught a huge fish in the East Alligator River. It was so big we invited all the other campers to Luke's barramundi barbecue. Yum, that's making me hungry. Tony, our Kakadu guide, led us through galleries of rock art. The sandstone overhangs were alive with animals, handprints and spirits from the dreamtime. Some of the paintings were more than 20,000 years old. One small handprint looked just like mine. The far north. As we travelled on the Barkly Highway, we caught up with a big mob of cattle. We stopped to share our cool water with the dusty drovers, and the boss let me ride his horse for a little way. Taffy was the same colour as Bess and just as gentle, but twice as tall. Near Cloncurry, the Flying Doctor's plane flew over us. We invented patience for him, and Luke had the best idea. A drover who got bucked off his horse and landed on a spiny anteater. At the circus at Mount Isa, an elephant ate my horrible hat. He swiped it off my head with her trunk and scoffed it. Thank you, elephant, I shouted. She didn't want to wear that hat anymore. Dad bought me a new hat at the Mariba rodeo. You look like a real cowgirl, Gracie, said Mum. We met an old stockman who taught us how to crack a whip. He showed Luke how to twist the cracker. That night, Billy and I rode our broncos until they couldn't buck anymore. The next morning, we drove through the shadowy green rainforest, and Billy said, "Are we there yet?" In far north Queensland, we walked beside the Daintree River. Giant butterflies landed on Mum's blue t-shirt. "They think you're a beautiful flower, Mum," said Billy. Luke found a snake-shaped piece of mangrove wood. He carved it into a walking stick for Popper. "I can't look," said Mum again. The Great Barrier Reef was a swirling underwater carnival of fish and coral. Isn't that beautiful? We went beach combing at Cow Bay, where the jungle came right down to the sand. Mum and I made a shell mermaid together. "When the tide comes in tonight, she'll swim out to sea," said Dad. I imagined her out there riding her dolphin like an ocean cowgirl. Heading south. In Cairns, we spent all our time at the pool. One day, Mum crashed into Billy on the water slide and got banned for the whole afternoon. At Hinchinbrook Island, we hiked for hours to swim at Mulligan Falls. That evening, we were so tired and sore, we all needed a back rub. We left the coast and drove inland to visit our friends at Miles. We all helped on the farm, and Luke had a go at shearing. The sheep looked skinny and embarrassed without their wool. At Surfers Paradise, we rode on a scary bungee ride. "Oh," moaned Dad as it catapulted up. "I can't look." But Mum laughed as she spun above the lights. "I can look," she shouted. Later that week, we caught heaps of fish off the jetty at Foster. That's all the fish that they caught. Boats skimmed across the sea as we drove down the coast. And Billy said, "Are we there yet?" When we got to Sydney, we parked our van in Uncle Pete's garden. Next day at the zoo, a baby elephant stared hungrily at my hat, so I ran. "No way," I yelled. "I like this hat." One day we went bushwalking in the Blue Mountains. Oil evaporating from the eucalyptus tree makes the blue haze. That's interesting. Mum and I imagined the kind of clothes the three sisters would wear. Uncle Pete's dog, Bongo, towed Luke all the way along Bondi Beach. On our last night in Sydney, we had a picnic overlooking the harbour. Cascading fireworks exploded across the sky and their reflections shimmered on the water. It felt like a farewell display for us. The cold country. On our way to the mountains, we stopped at Canberra and spent a whole day visiting galleries. Mum and I always liked the same paintings. Billy made a Ned Kelly helmet at Glenrowan. "Bail up," he said, "I'm a bushranger." Winter had arrived in the south and it was freezing at Mount Hotham. Billy and Luke and I had never seen snow before. We caught snowflakes in our mouths and we wore socks on our hands to keep them warm. We crossed Bass Strait on a big ferry. The sea was so rough we all felt sick, and Luke turned pale green. In the Hobart Museum, we saw a stuffed Tasmanian tiger. I felt sad to think they were extinct. Mum tried to cheer me up. "You never know, Gracie," she said. "There still might be a tiger family in the bush." We went hiking at Cradle Mountain. I kept looking out for tiger tracks. It rained so much we played Monopoly for hours. Luke always won, even when Dad and Billy and I ganged up on him. At the end of the week, we drove back onto the ferry, and Billy said, "Are we there yet?" Wilson's promontory, is the most southerly part of the Australian mainland. I found a paper Nautilus there, washed ashore at Squeaky Beach. One evening at Phillip Island, we watched little penguins surf ashore, then waddle up the beach like tiny explorers. Melbourne was crowded and fast after camping at the beach. The traffic noise kept me awake at night. We learnt to juggle at St Kilda. On the last day of our trip, Dad got us up early. As we drove away from the city, I looked back at the dawn through sleepy eyes. Winding along the Great Ocean Road, we stopped to look at the 12 apostles standing in the surf. The sea was wild and foaming, and we were nearly home. Finally, we were back at our house. Buffy was so pleased to see us, she jumped right into the car. I cuddled Tigger and called out to Bess. It was good to hear her whinny back. Billy woke up and said, "Are we there yet?" And we were. We were home. There you go. So that's Are We There Yet? And the ID again is 15132. Such a good book. Boys and girls, if you have been to any of those places that Alison wrote about in the book, please write a little post on our library classroom wall, and you can tell us where you've been and what you did, and you might even be able to share a photo or two with us. That would be so interesting because there's so many places that you can visit in Australia, and you might even have plans to be going to some of those places later in the year or something like that. So you can tell us about that, and we can all just think about trips we can go on or trips we've got planned, or memories of holidays that we've taken in the past. So it would be nice to share that and keep enjoying our books together. Thank you for listening today, and I will see you later on.